The sign said, "No camping beyond this point." No explanation, just a warning. 5 different groups ignored it over 10 years. Search and rescue only found 2 of them. When rain settles over Ironwood, it doesn't fall so much as arrive. It comes in under the brim of your hat and through your jacket seams, a slow seep that turns the world the color of nickel and pine pitch. The forest breathes it in and out until the fog isn't weather anymore. It's a language. I'm Ranger Lucas Hayden, 12 years on the Silver Range District, and I've learned to listen to what the weather says. Today, the message is simple. Keep your voice down. Ironwood State Forest stretches 120 square miles. Spurs of ridgeline and cedar gullies, old logging roads chewed back into roots, a spine of basalt that runs north to south like a submarine surfacing under the hills. At mile 21, the trail narrows and kinks around a bluff. There's a sign bolted to treated post. No camping beyond this point. Ironwood State Forest. No explanation. There used to be a laminated paragraph beneath. Something about unstable terrain. Rockfall hazard. It peeled off the first winter after we posted it, and nobody bothered replacing it. We tell the public that the rules about landslides. We tell rookies the same thing. But the rookies hear the other explanations too, the ones we don't print. They'll say, past the line the air's thicker, that radios squeal and copy themselves, that a fire dies with no wind because something took the oxygen for itself. They'll say a lot of things in low voices, holding coffee they don't drink. If you ask me, the truth is smaller and worse. The longer you stay out there, the more the place remembers your shape. The day I'm telling you about begins with drizzle that won't commit to rain. The trailhead gravel glitters with aluminum fleck and wet mica. My radio checks out fine. Battery topped, antenna tight, channel 6 clear. I sign the log. I jot the same note I always do. Boundary patrol, out and back. Then I shoulder my pack and start walking. 21 miles is a long way to have a single sentence end with a period, but that's how Ironwood feels. The whole forest one long sentence that ends at that sign. Along mile 6, the moss deepens like green felt draped over boulders. At mile 9, you get your first view down to Silver Creek, the water, the color of tin. By mile 12, the birds go quiet. Not all at once. They taper, like a fader pulled down at a slow, deliberate pace. I always notice it at the same bend. A hemlock with lightning scars. The silence arrives, and my radio hisses once like it just woke up. I check in anyway, because procedure is a shape you carry with you when other shapes might be watching. Range 2 to base, passing 12. Copy, Range 2, dispatch answers, 12 at 0843. My voice comes back a breath later, blurred by static. Passing 12. I let the doubling pass. No need to make notes on quirks I can't prove. There are names for it in the training materials. Temperature inversions, multipath interference, sound bending through damp, stratified air like light through old glass. You can explain most of it in a classroom with diagrams. The problem is, it doesn't feel like a diagram when it happens. I pause at a blowdown. The cedar fell years ago, and the trail detours around it, the momentary reroute worn as official as the cut itself. Rain ticks on my hat brim. On a day like this, you smell everything: the crushed fern, the iron in the mud, the mineral bite where rock slides newly opened in last winter's storms. I angle my radio away from my chest to keep the mic dry. Should have brought the better shell, a voice behind me says. I don't turn, that voice is mine. Not memory, not commentary, mine, a shade off like I swallowed a cold. I keep walking. People think the danger of this job is cats. Cougars on a tailing path, black bears who missed their lesson on shyness. Truth be told, I prefer the creatures I can see. I know the rules with them. The other thing, the reason there's a sign at mile 21 and a blank space where an explanation went, that reason doesn't obey signage. By mile 19, the fog thickens into cloth. The canopy knits over the trail, and the light slips down to evening even if your watch says morning. A rook, our new kid, would push his pace here, trying to outrun the feel of it. I don't. Going faster only means you get there sooner. I keep my cadence steady and my hands out of my pockets. Jess Moreno is waiting at mile 20 with her hood up. She's a month into the job, all jaw and impatience, hair braided so tight the rain can't find purchase. She lifts a hand in a half salute when she sees me. "You weren't supposed to meet me," I say. She shrugs. "Figured you'd say that. Figured I'd pretend I didn't hear." Her smile's like a flare on a wet road, bright and gone. She glances at my radio. "You getting the duplications today?" "Just once," I tell her. "You?" Her eyes flick past me down the trail we came, into the part of the forest we're not talking about. "Twice," she says. Same sentence. Didn't key my mic. We walk the last mile together. Our boots sound like the inside of a metronome. The rain makes a halo around her headlamp when she clicks it on out of habit, even though it's day. We don't talk, and our not talking is the fellowship of people who have heard too much noise. The post appears out of fog, the way cliffs appear out of fog. Sudden, unarguable. Someone sanded and restained it last season, but the wood's already swollen, and the screws sit proud. The sign faces down trail, bent a fraction of a degree off center, like a pitcher keeping one eye on first base. No camping beyond this point. Jess runs her thumb beneath the bottom edge where the laminated paragraph used to hang. "You really think this is about rock sliding?" she asks. "I think rocks slide," I say. Then, "and I think the ground isn't the only thing that gives way out there." She chews that. "Because of 09, she says, watching me instead of the sign. The 2009 Ironwood incident is a sentence we all know how to say. We just don't agree on where the period goes. 2 hikers, no bodies. 5 days of search teams, no tracks. Radios that repeated simple orders seconds after we issued them. The last footage on a found phone, a fire dying fast for no reason, then darkness, and a voice you don't want to attribute. After that, the boundary went up. The material said landslide risk. The old-timers nodded and did not nod, both at once. Jess circles the post. The backside of the sign is raw wood, the grain marked up with shallow gouges that look like someone tried to carve letters and changed their mind halfway through. The whole plate has a warp to it, like it was cured too fast and twisted trying to be something else. "Why's it canted?" she asks. "It's turned, just a hair. And the mile marker here, look." She taps the smaller aluminum plate that rides below the big sign. 21, stamped deep. The numbers glint through rain. From below, it looks backward. "It shifts," I say. "Frost heave. Post doesn't like its bed." Jess snorts. "Posts don't like anything." She steps back into the trail and stands where a hiker would, breath pluming, rain-making tiger stripes on her jacket. If it was just rockfall, why not fence it? Why not reroute to the ridge? She looks at me. "Why leave this?" She gestures at fog and trees and miles of maybe. "To be a rumor." "Because rumor's cheaper than steel," I say. "Lucas." I feel her waiting like a pressure drop in the room. The rookie wants the thing said out loud so it can be real or be dismissed. She hasn't learned that some truths only grow once you speak them. "There's places," I tell her, "where the map doesn't math. Where your compass gets a hiccup, and your words too. You'll call to a partner and hear yourself answer. You'll light a fire and learn the air had other plans. It's easier to tell people the slope will kill them, that way they won't argue." Jess looks past me again. Behind us, the trail we just walked is the color of a coin flipped too many times. She lowers her voice. Locals say the forest breathes different past here. They do. They say campfires die. They do. They say, she stops, because the forest finishes for her. A slow hush rolls across the needles, the volume turning down inside the world. It's like hearing a big hall empty out. In the blank that follows, my radio whispers. Range 2 to base, passing 21. It says in my voice, and then again, hair off, like an overdub that didn't sync. Jess stiffens. She's good. She doesn't turn her head. That was you, she says, barely moving her mouth. That was the weather, I say, and us if we let it be. I key my mic. Range 2 at the boundary, I say. Visibility reduced. Copy, Range 2. Dispatch says. Visibility. The rest comes back as a combing of static, like someone running fingers through the signal. We log the sign. We note that the bolts are tight. We write no observed damage because you can't write the world is off by a degree. We start our turn. Lucas, Jess says. Why'd they reopen after '09 if we never found the hikers? Because if you close a place for a story, people come for the story, I say. You reopen so it blends back into the rest of the forest. You put up a sign so we can say we warned them. You keep the reason small. We're at the first switch back when the drizzle knocks hard enough to become rain. Jess flips her hood and I cinch mine, and we both look up the way people do when weather changes. As if the answer lives in the treetops. My radio hisses, then clears, then a sentence repeats in a voice that doesn't belong to anyone on our channel. You still hear it too? My hand goes cold around the mic. Jess hears it. I can tell by the way she weights her feet, the way her eyes cut to the edge of the trail and back like she's checking lines of retreat that don't exist. Say again, Base, I ask, because routine is the candle you light when the lights go out. Nothing, just the old wet breath of trees. We make it as far as the blowdown before the news finds us. The call comes in not as a voice, but as a series of staccato chirps, priority hail, that breaks into dispatch mid-sentence. I tap my earpiece to clear the water. Range units, be advised, the operator says, voice suddenly crisp under adrenaline. 2 hikers crossed the boundary at mile 21 this afternoon. Last seen at 14:30 by a day group. No return at trailhead. Flagged overdue. Jess's mouth tightens. The rain forgets how to fall and becomes a sheet. Somewhere below us, Silver Creek changes its tone, a deepening like a throat clearing. Names, I ask. The pause lasts a beat too long. Submitting now, dispatch says. Text to units en route. Ranger Hayden, Ranger Moreno, you're the closest. Acknowledge. I look at Jess. She looks at me. We both look back down trail where the sign has already disappeared into weather like the end of a sentence swallowed by fog. Range 2 acknowledges, I say. We're on it. The radio clicks once in my ear, affirmation, a small sound with too much meaning, and then the forest breathes in like it's making room. The first file I ever pulled on the boundary cases was dated 10 years back, printed on that pale gray paper our office buys in bulk, the kind that already looks like a photocopy of itself. The tab read Ironwood/2013, Raven's Fork in a narrow hand I recognized as Wilkes, my old supervisor, whose S's always looked like something trying not to be a snake. 2 names, a couple out of Portland, weekend backpackers. They ignored the sign and camped a quarter mile beyond mile 21, near a shallow bend in the creek we call Raven's Fork, because the birds like that cut of water, an elbow of gravel bar and fallen alder, where the current slows and collects the forest's reflection. They were found 3 days later, alive but peeled back a layer. Clothes reversed, boots unlaced, both convinced it was the morning after they set up their tent. No memory of the second night, underlined twice. Sar wrote the report the way you write something you're not sure you should file. The sentences had a way of standing a little apart from one another. Subject A responsive, oriented to person and place only. Subject B, tearful, speaking softly, as if to someone not present. Vitals checked. Hydration re-established. No signs of assault or exposure beyond surface scratches. And the reddened eyes of people who've been crying quietly for a long time. There was one note that didn't fit. Recovered GoPro, a bullet point. Downloaded media, file integrity 72%. Nobody flagged it, because nobody knew what they were supposed to be flagging. I signed that file out from the cabinet last winter and brought it to the Ranger house like contraband. The GoPro went with it, a squat little plastic cube in an evidence bag, the lens scuffed with a crescent of wear like a fingernail mark. It took me an hour to coax the footage onto my laptop. Rain was working the windows that night. The wood stove ticked as it cooled. I watched a blur of normal camping, a tent rising in competent hands, a pot hanging, water seething, faces half lit by fire and headlamp. Their conversation was the unremarkable kind that means two people like one another. Then the audio changed. Not the sound of the weather, though that too shifted. The wind lost its edges, and the creek below them, the constant gnaw of water on stone, grew soft like someone turned a dial down. Behind the quiet, there came a cadence. At first I had to rewind because I thought it was artifact, the microphone chewing on its own static. But the rhythm had intention, syllables nested inside the noise. A sound like chanting stuttered in the far background, as if whoever was speaking had learned the idea of words but not their shape. I sat forward, ran it again with headphones. Under the windless hush something kept time. You learn in this job that the mind will try to make songs out of anything. Bees in a barrel, crossbreeds in a cathedral of fur. Pattern hunger is one of the last instincts evolution will surrender. But I've also learned not to outsmart what a recording tells me just because I don't like what it's saying. The camera shifted. The couple had set it on a tripod by the fire, aiming into the dark like they wanted proof that there was nothing to see. Firelight got strange things to do on a memory card. Pixels bloom, shadows breathe. Even so, the next part didn't feel digital. A flash of movement went across the far edge of the frame, no more than a smear, something passing between the fire and the trees without catching the flame's light. The woman's head turned like she felt a breeze that didn't touch the smoke. The man looked down at the fire as if it had learned a new trick. I paused it there. The logbook said they were recovered with their clothing reversed, shirts turned inside out, belts buckled but off the loops, the private, embarrassed panic of having dressed while not quite awake. The report didn't speculate. It never does. We filed data the way you stack cordwood, tidy, face out, gaps between the rounds so air can do the work you can't. I closed the laptop and listened to the house. Far off, a freight line worked the valley, horn softened by weather into a sound that remembered the word distance. I pictured the bend at Raven's Fork, the gravel bar like a pale tongue, the pools dark as coal seams, the way the trees hold back there like a crowd at a line no one drew but everyone feels. It rained through the night. In the morning, Jess and I hiked for the coordinates stamped on the file. Early winter, alder bones bare and slick, mud holding a print and then forgetting it in the same hour. My radio spat once at mile 18, then behaved like a scolded dog. We were both quiet, which felt like respect. "Do you think they made the chanting up later?" Jess asked when we stopped to drink. "Like dream residue?" "Dreams don't sync with the creek," I said. She tilted her head, not sure if that was an answer. "Whatever's on that track keeps time with something in the water," I added. "Hard to fake." "You listened with a metronome?" "With the creek," I said. "It's an old instrument." Raven's Fork looked younger than it should have. Flood had scoured last year's debris, left the bank clean-lined, reset the gravel like the Park Service had raked it. We paced the perimeter in slow circles, boots whispering, breath pluming. I worked a grid in my head while Jess worked one on the ground with flagging tape out of habit. We found no old fire scar, no pit. That wasn't surprising. This valley rearranges its furniture after every winter. But I was looking for residue, charcoal flecks in the duff, ash nested in a root flare, the black ghosts of fire leaves on nearby stone. I found none. What we did find sat 10 paces from the coordinates in a clear patch of gravel where floodwater had scribbled and gone. The sand there had settled in a pattern that made my eyes want to reject it. Ash circles, perfect thin rings, concentric, 5 of them, each no wider than a finger, drawn as if the river had been made of soot and a hand had spun inside it while it slept. Jess crouched. "Kids?" she asked, dubious. "Kids don't carry calipers," I said. The rings weren't etched into hardpan. They were laid, soot lightly sifted. I leaned down and blew. The ash held like it had weight. We didn't touch them beyond that. We photographed from knee and shoulder and above. I called coordinates to my radio twice, once for the log. Once because saying a thing number straight can keep fear from putting adjectives on it. "Explain this to me like I'm your officer review," Jess said, still squatting, hands on her knees. "Go on. Make it procedural so my brain doesn't bolt." "High water came through late fall," I said. "Cleaned the bar. If someone burned here since, they cleaned their site with care beyond the norm. No char in the organics. No spall on the stones. Could be a prank. Stencils." "Could be," I said. "Take the picture." She did. We stayed long enough to convince ourselves we hadn't missed the obvious. Then longer, because you don't leave a place like that quickly. Raven's Fork sounded like it always does when the wind drops, like a hard consonant scraped smooth. Somewhere upslope, a branch cracked and fell. The echo didn't bounce so much as slide, slow and even, as if the valley had been insulated with old quilts. "Echo zone," I said, mostly to hear it labeled. "Classic bowl." "Educational insert me," Jess said, smiling without humor. "Fine." I tapped the recording app on my phone, because when you recite a thing, it sticks better. Forest echo zones, dense, windless hollows where sound does the same trick light does in fog. 2 main effects, multipath and ducting. In multipath, a voice leaves your mouth and hits 3 surfaces, water, trunk, bluff, then returns staggered like a bad chorus, which your brain tries to reconcile, which makes your brain a liar. In ducting, cool air close to the ground traps sound beneath warm layers like a hallway. Words can carry beyond where you can see, then arrive from the wrong angle. That's your ghost, not a ghost, just physics misbehaving politely. Jess nodded. "And why does it feel like thinner?" "Because your brain keeps asking for a wall to put the sound against, and the valley won't give it one," I said. "It's like climbing stairs that don't exist. Eventually your legs still lift." She stared down at the rings again. "Physics didn't do that." "No," I said. "Physiology did the rest. When people are tired, scared, they decorate phenomena. They give it teeth." "And the chanting on the GoPro?" "Unknown," I said, "because that's what you say when you're not ready to put a name on something that might answer to it." We were turning to go when Jess caught my arm. She didn't point. Her eyes did. I followed their line back to the circles. Heat wavered above them, the way it does over a blacktop July noon. Just a shimmer, the air folding and unfolding itself delicately. Not flame, not smoke. A thin lensing of the world. If you weren't looking directly, you'd miss it. My mouth went dry. "Lucas," she said, and I could hear where she'd put my name, as a rope, not a question. "Easy," I said. "Stay wide." She nodded once, then tapped the thermal camera awake and lifted it. The device painted the gravel in bruised purples and blues, the creek in a gnashing white, the living trees in their small oranges. Over the circles the screen showed heat, a neat little medallion of yellow-white, like something had warmed the air in a plate-sized halo. "Do you see that?" Jess whispered, as if speaking at full volume might snuff it. "I see it," I said. My radio clicked once, a nervous tick. The heat coin pulsed, held, then brightened not at the center, but at the ring edges, each band limning a degree higher, as if the circles themselves remembered fire and decided to practice. "I'm recording," Jess said. I realized I was holding my breath and let it out slow to keep it from counting as speech. The thermal image cupped the circles like a hand keeping a secret. Then, with no wind and no change in the creek, the signature blinked. Not a fade, a page turn. One frame hot, the next frame ordinary. The screen fell back to blue. "Gone," Jess said. "Gone," I echoed, but not into my radio. For a long minute we listened to the river remind the stones what their job is. I glanced at the regular camera. We had our stills, but the thermal felt like the thing that might convince a supervisor who hadn't stood where we were. On the screen's replay, the coin of heat appeared and vanished in a neat loop that explained exactly nothing. "Couple in 2013 said they woke to a dead fire," I said. "No ember, no coal, just ash like someone sifted it with a sieve." Jess looked down at the rings until the rain dotted them into darker versions of themselves. "So that's the first fire," she said quietly, as if naming it very gently might keep it from spreading. We packed our gear without turning our backs to the ash until we had to. The tree line seemed closer than it had when we arrived. Somewhere behind us a raven made the sound a raven makes when it wants you to believe it's laughing. My radio stayed obedient. On the climb out, the air felt heavier, which is something we put in reports as relative humidity because the other phrase, pressure, makes people's shoulders rise. At mile 20, Jess said, "Why reversed clothes?" "Sleepwalkers dress wrong," I said. "Shock is clumsy." "Together?" she asked. "Both reversed?" I didn't answer, because any honest attempt would go where I didn't want our thoughts walking yet. Back at the truck, I sealed the thermal in evidence and phoned the office. The line clicked and cleared. The words sounded like they were deciding whether to say themselves. "Base, range 2, I said. "You'll get a packet on Raven's Fork. We found markings." "Unclear origin. Thermal event recorded." "Copy, range 2, dispatch said. We have your ping." Behind the voice, just for a moment, I heard breath. Not through the mic, through the line. Tiny, mechanical, regular, like someone at a distance was holding their mouth near our frequency. I logged it as ambient because anything else is editorial. That night I brought the 2013 file back to the house and opened to the last page. There was a sentence I'd skimmed the first time because it felt like the kind of thing a scared person might say that had no place in a formal report. Subject B states, "We woke up because the fire went out without smoke. The dark felt like a lid. I think we were arranged." Arranged. The word put my jaw in my hand. I looked at the thermal still on my table, the little coin of heat that had appeared where nothing burned. I pictured the thin rings of ash, perfect as a draftsman's mistake. Arranged is how you set a table for someone expected. Arranged is how you place stones for a boundary. Arranged is not a word you use if the night simply bested you. At 2 in the morning, the wind died. The stove ticked again. I stepped onto the porch because the inside of the house felt too occupied by my thoughts. Fog had climbed the road and lay on the grass as if to rest. Somewhere, a creek tried a new vowel. I brought the radio out with me. I don't know why. Habit is a superstition that pays a pension. I keyed the mic with my thumb and then didn't speak, just let the channel open. The speaker stayed quiet. A spiderweb along the railing held 100 drops, and all of them were moons. The kind of night that makes you think things you shouldn't. The thermal footage sat on the table behind me, paused on the frame where the heat signature wasn't. A clean circle remained, a negative halo. I clicked the mic off. The radio chirped its tiny goodnight. The next morning, I filed the images and the clip and wrote a very tidy paragraph about unusual residual heat at suspected former campsite. No active hazard observed. I left out the part where the hair at the back of my neck had lifted when the coin of heat appeared. I left out the breath. I left out the sentence in the old report about being arranged. We returned to Raven's Fork that afternoon with a second thermal unit, a different brand to confirm. The rings were gone. Rain had done what rain does. The gravel bar wore a new face, scuffed by deer, pocked by drip. Jess scanned anyway. "Clean," she said. Ghost of a ghost. We were packing up when the camera pinged. A little polite bell that means it has detected a transient. Jess lifted it fast. The screen, for one heartbeat, showed a heat form within the circle we had just lost. A shape low to the ground, the color of waking iron. No legs, no flame. Just presence. Round, patient, bright. "Got you," Jess breathed. Then the form blinked out, as if it had decided we had seen enough. Back at the truck, she played it back, frame by frame. The form appeared in one image, absent in the next. No smear, no fade. It had been there, and then it had not. "Explain that with echo zones," Jess said, trying to make her voice ironic and not quite getting there. "I won't try," I said. "I'll put it in the file." We did. We also did what Rangers do when the manual runs out of pages. We went for coffee and drank it by staring at the same bead of condensation like it had something to admit. "You think they lit the first fire and it finished itself later," Jess said finally. "I think the forest remembers everything we teach it," I said. "Fire names, how a campsite should look." She watched the window fog blur the lot. "And what did we just teach it?" "That will come back," I said. "That we check our work. That when something blinks, we blink too." Her phone buzzed. A text from dispatch. "Boundary update. C channel." We both looked at our radios, as if they might choose their words more kindly this time. On Channel 6, the operator's voice was thin with urgency. "Units be advised. 2 overdue hikers last seen near mile 21 did not return to trailhead. Daylight search approved at first light. Coordinate Raven's Fork as waypoint." Jess and I didn't look at each other, because not looking is sometimes the way you agree. We just nodded at the air and started making lists in our heads. Batteries, flares, extra thermal, flagging. I shut my laptop and the thermal still at the table caught my eye one last time. A bright coin in a ring of what used to be ash. A first fire that refused to be last. When I killed the lights, the house cleared its throat, the stove ticked, the rain restarted its lesson. I left the radio on the counter. It clicked once like a camera, then settled. In the morning we would go back, we would walk past the sign, we would do the job. And somewhere, just beyond what people call the boundary when they mean more than distance, I suspected the memory of a fire would be waiting, not for heat, not for fuel, but for company. The second and third files live in the cabinet's middle drawer, where the folders go to forget they were once urgent. The tabs read 2015/Raven Backroad and 2018/Drift Mesa, clipped with the same dull brass that has held too many ordinary tragedies together. I took both to the Ranger house and set them side by side on the table. Outside, the forest wore its usual November. Inside, the lamp turned paper the color of old bone. Incident number 2, 2015. 3 friends from Tacoma, late summer. They pushed past the sign because the campground was full, and because the sky looked gentle, and because the human jaw can say 1 more mile, even when the legs know better. Their GPS track showed a neat breadcrumb of pings up the Ravenback Road spur, then a gap, then a single point that remained stubborn as a tack through 2 nights of rain. They had built a small camp. The photos document competence. A taut ridged line, a bare hang, boot prints that speak of chores done without complaint. The strange part is not the layout. It is what they left when they abandoned it. On the inside wall of the tent, in pencil, they had written 2 phrases as if they could pin the dark to the fabric and keep it from moving. "Can't see the stars anymore. It's talking through the trees." The handwriting belonged to 2 people. The second line was carved hard. Letters pressed deep, the way you write through cold. There is an evidence photo of the tent skin laid flat on a table after recovery. In the harsh light, the pencil grooves look like healed cuts. 2 of the 3 were found together at dawn on the 3rd day, knees drawn, backs against a log, mild hypothermia. Disorientation. When asked what happened, they agreed on only the simplest outline. Night fell early. The fire went out without smoke. The river got quiet all at once. They heard someone speaking from the line of spruce just beyond the beams of their headlamps. Not a stranger's voice. Familiar. The cadence right, the vowels not quite. They did not go toward it. That is the only decision that belongs to them. The 3rd member, Survivor M, walked out alone the next afternoon, bareheaded, boots unlaced, eyes red as if from smoke. He refused the ambulance first, then accepted it without looking at anyone. In the interview, he kept touching his throat like he was checking it was still there. When asked how he found the road, he said, "I followed the smell of smoke." And then, when the ranger pointed out that their fire was out before midnight, he shook his head and said it again. "I followed the smoke." There is a line in the medical addendum I have never been able to file under ordinary. Trace odor of wood smoke detected on subject despite extinguished fire ring and wet clothing. No external source identified. The report lists possible low oxygen exposure, fatigue, and stress as contributory. That is the safest truth available. Incident number 3, 2018. Father and 16-year-old daughter from Boise, autumn. The map shows them many miles from the 2015 site, perched on high ground above Drift Mesa, where the trees thin and the ground is scabbed with mineral seams. The camp was careful. They had staked against weather. Their food was hung right. The ring was cold and tidy. And on a damp scrap of field notebook paper, the daughter had written, "The sky is wrong. I can hear the creek where the creek isn't." On the trunk of a nearby Douglas fir, a second note scratched with a blade, "Don't answer if it's behind you." Redactions curtain the rest of that file. The thick black bars leave only the shape of paragraphs and the outline of an argument the public is never invited to hear. A margin stamp appears where explanation would normally go. Category 9B, Auditory Phenomena. I had to look up the classification in the old crosswalk that lives in a ring binder under the radio. 9B is the bureaucratic bucket we use when 7A, the mimic call code, does not quite fit. 9B covers the edges, multi-source echoes, non-localized speech, reports of voice-like patterns in wind and water. The language is very clean. The effect never is. There is audio. The father wore a chest cam because the modern world has taught us to make witnesses of small machines. Most of what it captured is the soundtrack of any backcountry night. Creak, stove hiss, polite zipper sounds that make an interviewer feel like an intruder. Then, at 22:14, a thread of sound that does not belong where the map says it is. Water. Close. A full narrative of flow. On Drift Mesa, there is no stream within half a mile of their coordinates. They heard it like it was at their boots. The man's whisper, recorded by a device that cannot understand fear, says, "Do you hear that?" The girl answers, "It's at the tent door." There is only fabric there. There is only the black outside. The stove clicks as it cools. The water sound continues for a full 7 minutes while the camera remains pointed at nothing. When it stops, it does not fade. It ends, like a clause with a period. The pair were recovered at first light by a ranger who had followed their cautious breadcrumb of reflective tape back to camp. The father said he had been awake the night through. The daughter said she had dreamed of a river that forgot which way gravity works. A page near the back of the 2018 file carries a typed line that refuses to stop speaking once you have read it. Station memo issued. Do not repeat what was heard. The sentence sits like a palm on your mouth. It is a close cousin to what we teach in command silence drills. It is also an admission that the instinct to confirm is the most dangerous reflex in the woods. I closed the folders and pushed them until their edges touched. Paper has a temperature. Both were cool to the hand. Jess came by with coffee and the thermal prints from Raven's Fork. We stood over the table the way people do at the scene of a kitchen repair, except this was not a leak or a broken hinge. This was absence wearing the costume of evidence. 2 separate camps, she said, tapping the dates. Miles apart. Same handwriting that is not handwriting. Same phrases. Stars vanished. Trees talking. They did not confer, I said. No cell service. No shared cabin afterward. She watched me watch the notes. You think they were writing for themselves or for us? Both, I said. Most messages in the wild are half prayer. The other half is an address to the future. She raised an eyebrow. And the smoke? She asked. Survivor M said he followed it. I said, maybe he followed memory. The nose does not always tell time. Sometimes the body remembers a thing it wants to be true, and your feet obey the report. She leaned on the table. Or something wanted him to think the road had a smell, she said, then smiled in apology for putting a suggestion like that in the room. I took my map from the wall and spread it across the table. Ironwood under lamplight looks like a palm full of rivers. Contours tell you where the land keeps its old habits. I set pins at the 5 boundary cases. 2013 Raven's Fork, 2015 Raven Back Road, 2018 Drift Mesa, 2020 Old Quarry Spur, 2022 Burn Scar Ridge. A white ring of chalk around mile 21, the official line, the language of the sign. Let's see if the forest is drawing, I said. We measured distances the way surveyors confess belief. The pins do not lie. They formed angles so clean my throat tightened. Each separation held within 2/10 of a mile of its neighbors. Lines between them made a geometry school would envy. A pentagon took shape, 5 camps cornering a 6th space that has no name on any public brochure. The restricted zone sat in the center like a stone someone had lifted and then set down again, not quite where it had been. Jess exhaled. No chance that is random, she said, but quietly, as if an answer might hear. Chance is lazy, I said. The land is not. I traced the edges with the tip of a pencil. If you were mapping something without a surveyor, without a compass, using only what bodies choose when afraid or tired, you might still end up with this, if the thing you were circling pulled at you from 5 directions. Or pushed, she said. We drew bearings, altitude changes, prevailing winds. The inner space stayed dumb. No roads, no maintained trail, only old logging scar and a seam of sulfur-rich soil that makes the ground smell like a struck match after hard rain. Educational insert me again, she said, because humor is rope. I turned the map aside and spoke like a manual, not because I love the sound of it, but because I respect what it has saved. Low oxygen pockets happen when cool air pools in hollows, and fire eats what remains. Even in open forest, small inversions can make a ring where your blood works harder for the same breath. Add sulfurous soil, which ironwood has in seams, and you get an atmosphere that can irritate the lungs and head and bend perception. The result is dizziness, fatigue, poor judgment. On the sensory side, you may meet pareidolia, the brain's talent for finding faces and voices in noise. Wind through firs reads as speech, creek noise facsimiles laughter, stars dim behind fast-building strata, and the night says it has closed. She listened with her chin in her hand. And the notes that match across 3 years and miles, she asked, the exact phrases. Language migrates, I said. Somebody says it once. It lives in a log, a forum, a story told at a bar. A word can spread without leaving fingerprints. Except nobody posted these, she said. The tent photos were never public. There are days the rational path has a bridge out. You stop anyway and inspect the span, and then you find another way across. That is the job. I nodded. We keep the natural first, I said. We keep the rest as a bin for what the natural refuses. I copied the coordinates, marked the bearings, then wrote center on a sticky note and placed it over the nameless middle. The word felt immodest. I changed it to hold. We returned the files to their folders. I had just slid the 2018 report back into its sleeve when my laptop chimed with the kind of modest sound a machine uses when it wants to pretend it is not interrupting your life. I almost ignored it. Habit opened the lid. An email waited. No subject line. No sender in the way our program likes to see them. Just a short address I did not recognize. A string of letters that meant nothing with a number that meant less. The body contained a single sentence. You are drawing the wrong shape. Below it, an attachment. TIFF. It opened grainy, as if it had been scanned from a page that did not want to be handled. The header was a crest I knew, faint in the wash like a watermark. United States, redacted. Service. A stamp in gray failure ink. Internal. Do not reproduce. The title sat in the center, unblinking. Operation Egress. Do not acknowledge Camp 13. I scrolled, careful, as if quick movement might startle whatever lived on the page. A paragraph fragment survived the blackout. In the event that personnel encounter unmarked encampments within the restricted radius, field agents will treat the site as non-present, no verbal acknowledgement, no radio confirmation, no written description beyond time and coordinates. If questioned, respond with patrol language only. The camp is not there. Jess had come up behind me. She read over my shoulder in a breath that warmed the back of my neck. Camp 13, she said, barely voiced. Like a mile marker, she added, and then did not add the rest because she did not have to. The cursor blinked as if it had developed a pulse. I tried to trace the metadata, but the attachment had been scrubbed down to its birth. The email offered no reply address. The laptop hummed the way electronics do when they are thinking too hard. I looked at the map again. The Pentagon Center held its quiet. The word hold sat like a very small, very bright thing. You ever seen that title before? Jess asked. I shook my head. No, I said. But I know what it means, even if I do not want to. What does it mean? She asked. That someone once decided the safest thing to do was to lie to the forest and to ourselves at the same time, I said. The screensaver tried to come on and failed. The page stayed. The stamp on the header looked a little more tired. I printed it because ink on paper feels like leverage when you do not have any. The laser whirred. The page slid out warm and thin. A ghost given a body for a moment. I put it on the table between the files and the map. The room felt fuller than it had a minute before. The email evaporated when I reopened the window. The inbox reloaded itself and pretended nothing had happened. The attachment in my hand said otherwise. We stood without speaking, 2 Rangers and 1 page we were not supposed to have, listening to the radio do the little throat clear it does before dispatch comes on. Nothing followed. Somewhere out in Ironwood, a branch fell and did not echo. The note at the bottom of the scanned page, the only unredacted line that looked like a human had typed it and not a machine, read, If observed, exit perimeter. Do not look back. Do not count. Count what? The page did not say. We did not ask out loud. The printer coasted to silence. The map waited with its angles. The lamp hummed. The forest pressed quietly against the walls. I folded the memo in half and slipped it into a fresh manila envelope without a label. My phone vibrated once with a text from dispatch. Overdues confirmed. Last ping near Drift Mesa Spur. Weather shift incoming. Jess and I looked at each other, then at the unlabeled envelope, then at the map's bright pins. The subject line I did not receive had already done its work. Fog eats light differently in Ironwood. It doesn't dim it. It bends it. Flashlights glow like distant lanterns in milk. never where you point them. The night we went in after the missing pair, Jess and I learned what that really means. We left the trucks at 1840 hours. Temperature, 42 degrees and falling. Visibility, limited but navigable, as the paperwork would later say. I remember the smell more than the cold. That sour, mineral damp that comes before a front, when even the trees seem to be waiting for instructions. The two hikers, college students from Spokane, had left a trip plan with friends, estimated return by Monday morning. It was Wednesday. Their last GPS ping placed them just inside the no-camp zone, another rule broken by optimism. Jess keyed her radio. Base, Range 2 and Range 3, entering perimeter at mile 21. Static hissed, then a voice that could have been ours. Copy, Range 2 and Range 3 entering perimeter. The echo arrived 2 seconds late, soft and wrong, like a child repeating something it didn't understand. We didn't answer. That's protocol when you hear yourself talking back. The first signs. By mile 22, the track began to loop. Our GPS showed we were walking east, but the breadcrumb trail folded over itself like ribbon. The compass jittered between headings. The map app rendered the valley as open water. Jess checked her device. It's drawing circles, she said. That's fine, I told her. Circles still close. She laughed once, a thin sound. You always say that when it's not. We found the camp half an hour later. It sat in a clearing barely wide enough for sky, 2 sleeping bags, half rolled, a mug of coffee that steamed even in the cold. Too fresh to be abandoned long. The tent zipper hung open, slick with dew. See the pot? Jess said, still on coals. They left mid-pour. I knelt by the mug. The liquid trembled in its cup without wind. I reached out, felt the heat, real. Then the forest exhaled, and the ripples vanished like breath wiped from glass. We swept the perimeter, calling softly. Forest Service, call and respond. From far off, too far for our voices, came the answer. Forest Service, call and respond. It wasn't a mimicry of tone. It was a recording of intent. Jess's eyes found mine. That's us, she whispered. I toggled my recorder. Incident log, 2013 hours. Unverified voice return matching our call. Direction uncertain. Initiating command silence protocol. We stood still long enough to hear our own blood. Then the radio crackled with 3 words we didn't say. Please, help us. The voice was young, male, the missing hiker, a relief so sudden it felt like pain. Then came another, a woman. Over here. We both turned toward the sound, north, downhill, toward the river that wasn't supposed to exist. Jess took 2 steps before I caught her packstrap. Wait, I said. Call and response check. She hesitated, then said, Unit Alpha? The voice from the dark answered cleanly, Unit Bravo. That was the problem. Bravo isn't our code. We use colors, not phonetics. Jess froze. That's not us. The next voice was mine. Jess, this way. I swear on my badge, and whatever that still means, it was my voice. Same rasp, same rhythm. She looked at me like she was seeing 2 of me, one present, one rehearsed. Lucas? She said. Don't, I started, but she was already moving toward the echo. The disappearance. Her radio light bobbed ahead, swallowed by fog. I followed, keeping her beacon on my compass bearing until it blinked twice, then steadied. The forest sounded like breath. Not wind, breath. Each inhalation seemed to come from every direction. Then silence. I called once, low, no answer. Her beacon light was gone. The only thing left was the faint hiss of her radio channel. Not words, just sound, repeating every 10 seconds. Thump, thump, thump. I recognized it after the 4th pulse, a heartbeat, recorded and looping. I logged it aloud. Range 3, missing from visual contact. Device broadcasting pulse tone every 10 seconds. Possible distress or interference. The forest gave nothing back. Educational insert. Command silence. We train for this. In Search and Rescue Protocol 14-C, we call it auditory mimicry management. Sound bends in timberland. Branches scatter frequencies like mirrors. If a voice answers you too perfectly, it's probably yours. That's why rangers use call and response codes, pairs of words that change daily. The first ranger calls green. The partner answers stone. Never an echo, never the same rhythm. A real person has to think before they speak. A mimic doesn't. You never, under any circumstance, respond to your own words. I reminded myself of that, because forgetting is what the forest waits for. The camp rings. I kept north, following the faint smoke smell that shouldn't have existed, the same phantom scent the 2015 survivor had followed. It threaded through the fog, thin as string. After 20 minutes, my headlamp found open ground, a clearing. I knew it before I stepped in, that shift in air pressure when trees make room for something older than themselves. 5 fire rings, each 10 feet apart, arranged like the corners of a star. Every one cold and rimmed with wet ash. Metal tags nailed to nearby stumps, rusted numbers catching the light. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Something had catalogued them. The 5th ring smoked faintly. No visible flame, no ember glow, just the curl of breath rising from the soil as if the ground were remembering warmth. I crouched, recorder still running, and measured the heat with my hand. The air above the ring pulsed like a living thing. Range 3, I whispered, knowing she couldn't hear. If you can, respond by keying your mic twice. 10 seconds passed. Then, click, click. Relief and dread share the same heartbeat. Stay put, I said. I'm closing distance. The radio replied with a third click, like a finger tapping glass. The fog brightened suddenly, just a shade, as if moonlight had remembered its job. Shapes took form at the edges of the clearing. Not people, not yet, just postures, like silhouettes printed on air. The smoke from the 5th ring rose higher, forming a column that shimmered with small red sparks before dying again. The final call. Behind me, leaves crunched, soft, deliberate. Jess's voice came from the dark, low and steady. Lucas, she said. The sign moved. The way she said it made my skin pull tight, because it wasn't surprise in her tone. It was recognition. I turned. The beam caught her jacket's shoulder, the radio mic gleaming wet. She was standing just beyond the 1st ring, eyes unfocused, like someone listening to a sound I couldn't hear. Jess, I said carefully, stay outside the circle. Her mouth moved. The sound that came out wasn't speech but repetition. My own voice, the same phrase I'd just said, looping through her lips. Stay outside the circle. Then her radio pulsed once more, thump, and every fire ring answered with a whisper of smoke. The last thing on the recording before the file cuts is my own breath, hitching, and the sound of footsteps. Mine or hers, I can't tell, running towards something that knows both of our names. Morning came gray and weightless, the kind of dawn that doesn't climb, just appears, as though the night grew tired of itself and left. I woke on the edge of the trailhead, slumped in the driver's seat of the truck, with the radio still hissing faintly. The windshield was filled with moisture, and the mist had pressed its fingerprints into the glass. For a few seconds I didn't know where I was. Then the smell hit me. Smoke and pine, and something else beneath, faint but metallic, like a memory that hadn't quite stopped burning. Jess was gone. Her pack sat in the passenger seat, straps neatly buckled, as if it had always belonged there. Her radio, silent now, lay in the cup holder. I checked it out of habit. Battery full, channel 6, no pulse tone. I keyed mine. Range 2, final patrol report. Trail secure, no active fires. The phrase rolled out of me on autopilot. The bureaucratic blanket we throw over the holes in our maps. The words mean, we found nothing, but something found us. I clicked the recorder next. The little red light blinked, waiting. I spoke slowly so I wouldn't have to listen to myself later. Ranger Lucas Hayden, closing statement. Ironwood sector. Every warning sign is a grave marker that someone didn't read in time. We post them because we owe the people who didn't make it out a boundary. We maintain them because forgetting costs more than fear ever will. I paused, the recorder humming soft as breath. I won't be recommending reopening the area, I added. If asked, I'll say it's the soil. I'll say it's erosion. I'll say anything except what it really is. The sun crept higher, though I never saw it. Just a thinning of fog, the light whitening the trees until they looked like ghosts, trying to remember how to be wood again. I flipped open my field notebook and began writing what I'd later turn into the SAR bulletin, the kind that reads clean and practical for anyone who comes after us. Respect boundary signs. They exist for reasons you'll never find in a brochure. If you see no camping beyond this point, turn around. It doesn't matter how clear the sky looks or how close the ridge seems. Never camp in unverified zones. Even 100 yards past a posted line can make all the difference when visibility or signal fails. Log your location hourly using GPS, map, and radio. Write it down. Machines forget faster than people think. Carry redundant light and sound signals. Flashlight, flare, whistle. Your own voice is never enough out here. And if the forest feels like it's listening, don't answer. These were the things I could say without losing my badge. The rest would stay in the quiet margins where the official record doesn't reach. When I stepped out of the truck, the forest didn't feel malevolent anymore. It just felt full, saturated with sound and silence both. The fog peeled off the trailhead like a curtain, revealing the old wooden post that marked the start of the boundary. Only it wasn't old anymore. The sign had been replaced. Brand new wood, freshly carved letters, paint still wet enough to glisten. No camping beyond this point. Fire hazard. I stood there a long time, staring at the words. I don't know if someone from the department swapped it overnight, or if something else wanted the warning renewed. At first glance, it looked exactly right, except for the handwriting scrawled in pencil just beneath the official lettering. The graphite was smudged from dew, but still legible. It doesn't burn. The handwriting wasn't Jess's. It wasn't mine. I took a step back and looked at the tree line. The fog there pulsed faintly in the light, the way heat does when it's remembering where it came from. I turned off the recorder and slipped it into my jacket. Then I touched the edge of the sign, just once, and felt how cold the wood was despite the morning. That's when the forest made its final sound, a low, distant exhale that stirred the needles and moved nothing else. I walked away before it finished. As the truck rolled down the service road, the radio clicked once. No voice, no code, just a faint breath, maybe the sound of wind. Maybe the sound of someone realizing I was leaving. In my report, I'd write that the area was stable, that no structures were damaged, that the fire hazard had passed. I'd write every safe word I knew. But in the private log, the one I'd never send, the one Jess would have laughed about, I wrote one final line. The signs aren't there to keep you out. They're there to keep something else from finding you. Then I turned off the radio for good and let the forest close the book behind me.